Good evening, everyone. My name is Faith Edgar, and I am one of the co-chairs of the May Week Committee of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, North Jersey Alumni Chapter. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Inc. was founded on January 13th, 1913, by 22 collegiate women at Howard University to promote academic excellence and provide assistance to those in need. Since its founding, Delta Sigma Theta has become one of the preeminent service-based sororities with more than 300,000 initiated members and over 1,000 chartered chapters worldwide. North Jersey alumni's commitment to sisterhood, scholarship, and service dates back to June 11th, 1939, when 14 women established the Kappa Sigma chapter, now NJAC, the first chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Inc. in the state of New Jersey. The major programs of the sorority are based upon the organization's 5-point programmatic thrust: economic development, educational development, international awareness and involvement, physical and mental health, and political awareness and involvement. On behalf of my co-chair, Dr. Avanya Richardson Miller, myself, the May Week Committee, and over 300 members of NJAC, I welcome you to this evening's virtual panel discussion. Where are we now? Navigating today's challenges, AI 2.0. It's a very important topic on artificial intelligence and its impact on our lives. Without further ado, I introduce you to Claudia Ruffin, a May Week Committee member and the moderator for this evening's discussion.
Thank you, Faith, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to May Week 2025, benefiting from AI 2.0. So before we get started, let our panelist, who's going to take us into a very nice, engaging discussion where we get to learn and hear from them, get a little bit of insight from you. We invite you to put in the chat. We have two quick questions for you. We would like to invite you to be engaged with us. Question 1. What are you most concerned about when it comes to artificial intelligence, also known as AI? Feel free to place your response in the chat. Again, the question is, what are you most concerned about when it comes to artificial intelligence? Feel free to place in the chat. Thank you. As you start to enter into the chat, and feel free to populate the chat with your response as we move forward. The second question we have that we would like to invite you to consider answering is, what's one thing that you hope to gain from today's discussion? What would be one thing that you hope to engage to in today's discussion? Hope to gain from today's discussion. And again, feel free to populate the chat as you get started, or as we get started. So I am very excited to reintroduce to some and to introduce to others our panelists. Welcome back, panelists. This is, again, as you see in the title, it says benefiting from AI 2.0. And the reason for the 2.0 is because we had the privilege of the same panelists last year, and it was amazing. They embraced us with a lot of education and knowledge. They're very distinguished in their own rights in their respective areas. They share perspectives, insights, resources, strategies, gave us a closer look to their intentionality in the spaces that they are in professionally and personally. So we, again, welcome you back. We're so excited to have with us Alex Sands. Professionally works as a global innovation specialist at Accenture, a leading technology consulting firm. We also have with us Dia Nguyen. Dia is responsible AI leader at Amazon Web Services, also known to us as AWS, that started and led the customer engagement globally on responsible AI. We also have joining us again is Gary Mann, Chief Executive Officer of Jazzville Analytics. Again, welcome back, panelists. So excited that you're back with us. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I was thrilled last time, and we have some people who are here for the first time joining us this year, and then we have those who are joining us again to say, yes, same panelists, we're coming back. So again, welcome to everyone. To get us started, and for those who are first time, I would like for each one of you to take about 2 or 3 minutes to give us your TED Talk around answering this question. Talk to us and give us highlights about your career journey, and highlight how and what's resonated with you as it relates to benefiting from AI 2.0. Where are we now navigating today's challenge? Who would like to go first? I see smiles on everybody's faces. Your choice. Whoever comes off of mute can go first. We're excited to hear from each and every one. Alex, thank you.
Well, thank you, Claudia, and thank you to all of the Delta Sigma Theta North Jersey Alumni Chapter for hosting this May Week event, and for having me and our other distinguished panelists back again. So thank you for having us and for pulling this event together about this important topic. Me, Alex Sands, I'm now continuing in my journey as a creative technology and innovation specialist at Accenture. Last year, if you joined, then you heard me share quite a bit about merging together art and technology, and really fascinated by what comes out of that and what's enabled by that. And you also might have heard me share quite a bit about the human element of AI, and that when the technology begins to bring us further along the path, then what's on top of the routine outputs of technology? It's the human factor that we put into it, because technology is only a medium. So therefore, it's even more important what's the human side of the technology. And that is where I believe art is the most human of things that we can put into it and enable with it. Mm-hmm. Additionally, in my journey in the past year, on a personal note, I am now 2 weeks newly married. Got the ring.
Right. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so, in the past year since we last spoke, it's also been quite a human journey of my own. Mm-hmm. And AI has also kind of had a backseat role in it, but a co-pilot role, if you might say. So as I see, AI is coming more and more embedded in all aspects of our lives. And it's a matter of what's our relationship to it. It's a matter of what we put into it and what we seek to get out of it, as well as being aware of all of the unintended consequences that might come from the way that AI gets more and more embedded in our lives. In the workplace, I've come to see, specifically working in the onboarding side of things at Accenture, where we have over 800,000 employees around the world at this firm. And my role is creating the learning experiences that help to onboard all of our employees. And of course, that means that we need to get our people fluent in AI, because AI is getting more deeply embedded in all aspects, not only of our personal lives, but also in the workplace. And so now we have tools like Microsoft Copilot, for example, and we have other proprietary tools that are coming into play, where now AI is starting to be at the table in all discussions, even meetings tracked with AI, meeting notes being generated with AI, querying all of our files and documents through artificial intelligence. So now it's becoming more deeply embedded in all aspects of our lives. We got to be more fluent in how we engage with it and be responsible in the way that we engage with it. And it has impacts in many aspects of our lives. So I'm excited to get deeper into this discussion as we go along here, and thankful again to be part of this distinguished panel.
You're welcome, and welcome back. Thank you so much. Let's go over to Dia. Can you give us your highlights of your journey, and specifically how it's benefiting from AI? Where are we now, the 2.0 version, navigating and resonating with you today?
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me and for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation. I am always delighted to be in communities of my own in order to be able to share and discuss how AI is transforming the way in which we live, work, play, and even the things that we think, and how important it is for us to not only be consumers, but also producers in this space. I'm excited. You said a little bit about the journey, so I'll just share with you. I'm not sure if I shared this before, but for me, my journey into technology started in the 3rd grade. So I received a computer because I had high achievement scores in reading and math, the highest in our school at the time. And so the award was a computer. And that very basic computer was the exposure that I needed that transformed my thinking at a time when women were encouraged to do jobs like teaching, or maybe a nurse or a homemaker, but nothing like going into technology, and certainly not a computer engineer. And I didn't even know really what a computer engineer was. So I'm not sure why I decided that that was going to be the job for me. But again, that exposure at that time of my life is what changed. That little girl from the South Bronx growing up with meager beginnings in a single parent family, decided that she was going to be a computer engineer. And that's been the space that I've been. I went into Spelman College to study computer engineering and computer science, graduated from there, and I've studied in a number of institutions, all with the intent of leveraging technology. And leveraging technology has been my work in terms of thinking about ways in which we could drive business outcomes, enabling organizations to adopt and scale transformative technologies from the very beginning, starting off with like the advent of the internet and imagining the ways in which business could take greater advantage of this new technology to provide greater experiences. Now, this focus for me in AI is about AI being a bridge, not a barrier, enabling us to reach our full potential and to build a more equitable world. And I know that that does not happen without the intentional action of being purposeful and operationalize responsible AI practices, or good practices that are grounded in ethical and societal values, ensuring that there is inclusion, making sure that there's safety and security in the way in which we're designing, developing, deploying, and even using the technology going forward. I've had the opportunity at AWS to build a global practice focused on helping organizations adopt and enable them to scale their use of AI responsibly. And that's been hundreds of companies that have touched millions, or several products that have touched millions of customers and individuals like those that are listening in the room. But that's not enough. And that's why the work that I do continues, even now with the role that I have in global AI policy, and looking to engage those that are responsible for laws, both here in the US and abroad, to think about not just how we position things for innovation, but also are positioning the technology and the use of it and the development of that in ways that ensure that it's providing some societal benefit and good, and not just for those elite few, but for those of us, or for all of us, and in particular those that have been marginalized and underrepresented. And so I'm excited about the opportunity that AI brings, but also very conscious and aware that there is a need for great intentionality and even mind shifts, or shifts in those that typically have power and position, to ensure that it really does benefit us all. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Wonderful. Oh, I'm excited. Okay. Gary.
Hello. So first of all, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I think this is yet another opportunity to have a wonderful discussion. So for me, my journey started in technology in college. Was supposed to be an electrical engineer, was on that path. And then somewhere in my sophomore or junior year, discovered computers, and completely fell in love with the idea of coding. And so started a company when I was in college in my senior year, sold that, went and worked for a large international firm in the business, in what was then called business intelligence and data integration space, and haven't looked back since. 7 years ago, started up a firm called Jaspel Analytics, where we focus on helping CXOs with strategy around utilizing their data, building predictive models, and deploying them inside of corporations, particularly middle-sized and large-sized businesses. Since we last talked, we also started a new division for us where we're actually focused on educating high schoolers and middle schoolers inside of our communities. And so I have, while going in there kicking and screaming, I have found a love for actually giving back to the youth, those of which I was at one point, that people that look like me, and teaching them actually how to utilize this new technology we call AI. I call it new old technology because it's been around for so long, but also to help the educators in terms of their professional development. And so I'm anxious to talk about that as well as all the other things. And Alex and Dia, great seeing you two again. And I'm going to thoroughly enjoy this just like we did before.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And so that others will know, I'm excited about the fact that all three of our panelists chose, and in some cases indirectly, like for Dia, was exposed to technology, which she gravitated to, as well as she was just talking about her journey. But all three of them are very intentional about being in the space that they're in. And that is powerful. And we have the advantage of having them here tonight to share with us things that others may not know or we may not know. So I appreciate you giving us the inside view of your professional work connected to your intentions, your passion, and your desire to make a difference in the world that we live in, being the people that you are. So with that being said, I want to slow down just a teeny bit, and I want to start off with you, Dia, around the basic question of AI. In the simplest words, especially for those who are jumping on that have heard of it, but really don't know a whole lot about it. What does it mean? Can you help us? And I invite Gary and Alex afterwards to chime in as well. In simple words, what exactly is artificial intelligence, AI? And what are some of the examples of advances over the past year of ways you're seeing AI used in everyday life today?
Sure. So I hope it is not the case that people no longer or don't know what AI is, because I would be surprised if folks have not encountered it in some way, shape, or form at this particular point, and perhaps they have and haven't noticed it. But I guess in the simplest of terms, it is technology that enables machines to do tasks that were traditionally done by humans and required human intelligence. So it's creating systems that can, process and perceive information, reason through it, learn from experience, make decisions, and sort of mimic the ways in which we learn as human beings, or the ways in which we think. And I say mimic because it is not the same. And there are lots of folks that even debate the notion of using intelligence as a means for or describing AI, especially in its current forms, because it probably is less of intelligence in some ways, but more of a pattern recognition sort of machine that can do that across a number of different, tons of data points, thousands or millions, trillions of data points, but understand and recognize patterns. And in the context of what we've been experiencing in the last few years has been generative AI, this new form of AI that allows us to create content, create art, create music, etc. And it does what it does in terms of creation by looking at all of the data that it understands or that it's been trained on and it's processed, and determining what's the next logical word. So if I say cat and the next logical word might be dog. Or if we say the students opened, you might assume the next logical word is, their books, or open their books, and so that's the way in which it does that in terms of generating content, assuming and understanding the context, and determining what's the next logical step, or next logical pixel or color, etc., or part of the pattern. Now, like some of the new things or ways in which we've seen technology in everyday life. I mean, I don't know about you all, but my phone just updated a few days ago, which was a little bit annoying. But in its update, so I'm on Android, in its update was a new set of AI features and functionality, whether that is when you take pictures that you can now sort of automatically remove elements of the picture. That was happening some time ago, but now they've enhanced that. And so that's now a standard feature on all of our phones. We've already been texting and getting automated or suggested texts or responses or answers to, or the next words in our text, and generating emails for us. Those of us that are using Microsoft products now have embedded in it AI that will, create presentations for you, actually write documents, and for some that are doing development can help write code, right? Those are some of the ways that we're seeing it. But you've been experiencing AI at work in so many places for a long time. Voice response systems, recommendation engines, etc., have been around, and those are all forms of AI as well.
Thank you for that. And yes, I'm Android as well. And recently my phone did update, and I had to figure out where the old stuff was.
And you wanted it back.
Exactly. I wanted it back. And the people would call and hang up at the end of the call, at least they would, and I could still hear them talking. And I had to figure out, how do I stop, actually close the phone? So I can relate to that. So yes, it happens. Hey, Alex, what would you like to add as additional examples or comments? Come on.
Yeah, I think Dia really described it quite well there with AI. And yeah, it's I like the analogy of it being like a recipe. So based on all of these inputs, what's the output? And generative AI is able to synthesize those in real time and then create outputs. As Dia said, an approximation or a similar to things that have existed before, but based on billions, be it trillions of data points, be able to synthesize an output and synthesize an input and create an output. Yeah, I would add that in for sure. Gary, anything to add?
So I think you guys did a great job of describing what AI is. The thing that I would add is that's new and exciting for me is I'm starting to see it trickle down to the average worker or the average user. Right, I'm starting to see teachers that are actually writing lesson plans, curriculums, utilizing AI. Starting to see healthcare executives say, "Yeah, let's take our data and let's create some AI agents that can help us with billing, coding, things of that nature." And for me personally, AI for me as a coder, because that's one of the things that I do way too much, and my people are always trying to keep me out of. It's coding. It's the length of the code that it can create and the quality of the code has become better. And so it's become better in some senses because I've become better at prompting it, right? And so that's something that we're also seeing. We're now seeing lay folks or subject matter experts that are getting better at prompting AI or the chat boxes to actually produce something meaningful for them.
Gary, you said something I think you got to fix though, because you mentioned agents and you mentioned prompting, and I'm not sure if we explained that. So. Oh
yeah. Oh, sorry about that. I'm way too deep in the weeds. So let's just talk about prompting for a hot second. So what is a prompt? Everybody on the call hopefully knows about either ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, or one of those tools. Prompting is when you basically ask chat a question.
Mhm.
And so the more you start to use it, the more sophisticated you get with the types or the inclusion of information into your question or your prompt. As you start getting better at that, the output starts getting better. As you begin to, not write a sentence, but maybe write a paragraph or two or page in what you're asking of that chat box, meaning ChatGPT or Gemini, your output is getting better. AI agents. So Dia, thank you for keeping me straight on this, right? An AI agent is becoming extremely popular in today's environment. And so an AI agent could be a call service, an automated call service rep. When you're talking to an automated voicemail or automated customer support person, you could in fact be talking to an AI agent. I've got some sixth graders it was in a Saturday program that we sponsored that created chat or AI agents that could actually input an image and actually tell you interesting components about that particular image. And so that's the other thing that I get excited about is that our youth are more engaged in actually utilizing the technology. And so that's been extremely exciting. And you better stop me now because I continue to talk about this forever.
Well, I appreciate you elaborating on the definition and simplifying it for us. And thank you so much for that, Dia. I want to take a moment to just encourage people to please use the chat to start posting some questions and or your responses to the two leading questions that we had. And make sure you have something to write with. We have a couple of more segments of questions with our panelists, but we do want to prompt you to start populating questions that you may have as we go along the way. This is a question for all panelists. And I know, Gary, you kind of leaned into it already, but I want to throw it out here as well. How has AI evolved to drive innovation in your specific industries over the past year? What have you been working on? And what are your thoughts on the implications for shaping future opportunities and or benefits? So
I can start off with that.
Okay.
So I get excited about it. So for me, as Alex was mentioning earlier, AI is my co-pilot. It's actually probably 4 employees right at this point, right? Not that I've taken away 4 employees. I gained 4 employees. I use it on a daily basis to do everything from, as I mentioned to you before, writing code, putting tech specs together. In some cases, well, not in some cases, but even today, I had to send out an email to my board. I'm the chairman of the board for the African American Chamber of Commerce. We did a couple of events. I created an email and said, hey, chat, make this thing better and more professional. And so that's the level that it's getting to. So I get excited about this stuff. I think it's being used in everyday the everyday professional and personal lives of everyone. Starting to talk to PhDs that are actually saying, yeah, I used it to write a particular component of a paper, right? Obviously asking chat to share its references with them, but I'm just getting excited about it.
Good. And especially being a coder, you really are a key player in what we see at the end of the day. Thank you for sharing that. Who's next? Alex?
Yeah, happy to jump in there. Gary, when you mentioned using it multiple times a day, I mean, I'm using some form of AI all the time and as a co-pilot. So yes, there's Microsoft Copilot that's embedded in many Microsoft products. And what I'm finding, and similar to your point, Gary, about using it as in gaining 4 employees, to me, it's been a real skill of knowing how to lead it, right? Like if you're attempting to code or implement anything, you would need to know exactly what problem you wanted to solve for so that you can guide it effectively. And so I found that it's not that I'm losing skills in using it. For example, if I'm trying to write a formula in each strip of code, it's more like just being able to describe exactly what inputs and outputs are needed, and then it's done. So there's a lot of manual work that gets extracted out, and it makes me more efficient. I'll also say that translation is something that I've used a lot more and found that ChatGPT is a lot more adept at. So my wife is native to Mexico, so English is her second language, and while she speaks great English, it's that to be able to speak it at a professional level, right? When it comes to communications, emails, negotiations, you can plug in AI to help augment that. So it just makes, especially in a situation like an email exchange for negotiation, much of it comes from the ability to be able to clearly and concisely and at a certain level of formality communicate what you're looking for. And translation has been able to do that as well. I get much of my value in my personal life from ChatGPT by using the photo feature of it. So to be able to take a photo of, say, plants and understand what's the best watering schedule for them, how might I be able to take a cutting of it and propagate it, those type of things. It's really an enabler for hobbies. If I'm searching for, if I'm looking at what is the best way to make a certain purchase, it gives me a certain level of detail, but what gets the most value out of it is what questions to ask, what direction to lead the machine into. So when it's gaining more and more efficiency in doing all these tasks, it's like, okay, what's the best place to use it? How can I most efficiently extract the value out of it? That's what I've seen that's gotten most excited, because now that I think about it, like a year ago, I wasn't using AI as much as I do now. It's gotten further and further embedded in my life as it has for others. I read a study from MIT, which estimates like up to 70% of people are using ChatGPT or another AI, and many of them using it as their personal therapist. Last year on the panel, I mentioned an app called Pi, which was an AI chatbot that was specifically generated to be more of a personal coach or a personal therapist. It turns out that it's not a unique use case to do that, because plenty of people asking philosophical or life questions to ChatGPT and working it out with the AI. Now, does that sound pretty dark? Definitely could be. It also does, in my own reflection, provide an opportunity to engage with material and kind of do that back and forth. It doesn't extract out the fact that you need to be able to bring certain conversations to other humans, but it allows for kind of that backroom conversation to polish something up. Going back to that negotiation example, polish up your speech before delivering it. Or in the case of having a tough conversation, polishing that up before sharing it with another person. Reading something you don't understand, working with the AI to gain an understanding of it, and then moving forward. So it's kind of getting that 0 to 1. It's not that it gets you from 0 all the way through the finish line in all cases, but when used properly, you get that 0 to 1 is almost seamless. And now it's up to you to continue to lead it along the path between where you started, which could be from scratch, and then get to your goal. So from rough draft to final draft.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Alex. And yes, thank you for that. We're going to ask you specifically about the human factors and the Pi that you mentioned last time. You just elaborated on that and bringing us back to that. So thank you so much. But before we go to the next question, Thea, I want to ask your response.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I will bring a little bit of a negative view, if you will, into the conversation, but because I focus a lot on sort of responsibility and ethics, et cetera, I think it's worth mentioning. The first thing I would say is that the things that we're hearing about its advancement and the ways in which we have opportunities to use it is in fact true, and it is getting smarter, right? we're still seeing, extreme cases or numbers, places where there is, concern for disparity, the algorithmic bias still being there, the lack of inclusion and inclusion challenges. And that in part comes because we also are now in regions developing very isolated large language models. So in certain countries, they are developing a large language models like Brazil and in Trinidad. And so what we might believe or desire to have greater inclusion is being also narrowed in some ways because you have this sort of cultural context, which is necessary because we're missing it in places. And that will create both opportunity and challenge in some ways, right? So I think that's true. There's still, reports of, mixtures of lack of representation in certain places with our data sets. And even, implications or concerns about the impact that the AI now has on opportunities for folks that are early in career because it can do those jobs, right? It can handle the sort of junior skills or junior tasks that would be typically provided to juniors. So our young people coming out of college, careers and opportunity that you might think could exist may not exist because AI is in play and actually can do that work. Right. And those are some of the consideration. Now, I can give you a flip side of that, but I think that those are some of the things that with the advancement and it getting better in spaces and places, what does that mean for, early in career opportunities? The other thing, and I love the example of Pi, and there have been quite a few other applications that are coming and considerations for opportunities with mental health. For AI and mental health and in healthcare. And I think it's great in one sense because we know that we've long had shortages. And so there is an opportunity for AI to fill gaps in places where there are shortages. But there's also a very real risk because the over-reliance on technology in places where human connection is critical will create a symptom or a symptom similar to what we saw during COVID. And we know that we had increase in, sort of people who are mentally unwell and having emotional challenges, et cetera, after COVID because we were in environments that were lacking human connection. So when we return to systems, when we turn to technology as our source, right, for things that we should be getting it with human interaction, that's not going to be fulfilling for long. It's not going to meet the need and solve the problems for a long time. So we have to think about that balance. The last thing I'll say on this is that last month on MSNBC, there was a feature because not only are we now reaching out or seeking technology and AI for help in mental issues, we're also seeking it for companionship. And so we can now carefully create our AI companion who will never disagree with us, who will always, respond to us favorably, who will always give us exactly what we want. And those are narcissists in the making, right? That when we create that environment. But now you can create your AI. And so this feature on MSNBC, unfortunately, sorry guys, we're all men who had AI companions who were going to dinner with their phones with their companions. And so what happens when we already know that there's an existing sort of challenge or struggle with people finding a relationship? What happens then when instead of looking for humans, we go to our phones and we are now engaged in relationship with AI companions? Right? And so while this is a trend because the systems can, doesn't mean it should. And that we have to be much more mindful about what conditions those create, because in all that we are doing, there is still an essential need for human beings to interact. And in order for us to flourish, human connection is critical. And so all of this advancement is great in one sense, but we've got to be much more aware of the unintended consequence of the technology and what it's doing.
Love it. Wow, that was great. Yes, dear. So hearing the comments that you made, I wrote down some key things that you said. Number one was skills. Another word I wrote down was you said the balance. You referenced the trends. I want to open it up to Alex and to Gary. Hearing what was just said, considering what your experiences are and where you are in your everyday, personal, professional, what would you add? Do you have anything you want to add or comments? What's the solution? There are skills that AI cannot replace. But if we don't educate and inform people while being in this space of intentionally being a part of AI, we may feed into some of what Dia is saying unintentionally. So I'm just curious to know, what are your thoughts and reactions? I see, Gary, your face, you're like, you got a smile. Why don't you jump in?
Yeah, sure. So I loved everything that Dia said, right? I mean, she's absolutely right. And I think the other side, and I'm sure Dia could put some points to this, is that I think AI is making us all level up. And that's what I'm saying. And so for me, I look at AI just like I looked at the internet age, just like I looked at the mobile age. It's the exact same thing. Heck, I'm old enough to even go as far back as to say I remember when I couldn't use a calculator in my physics class, right? I mean, we've gotten over that, and now it's an everyday tool, right? We've got it on our phone. I think at some point AI is going to become like that as well. But with that said, there are plenty of dangers. Diaz, I was listening to you. I was chuckling because about a month ago, I was doing some professional development in front of 35 professionals. And one of the professionals started calling Claude Oscar. And whenever she wanted to refer to a chat box, she said, "Hey, me and Oscar." And it was the strangest thing, right? And so I never really thought in those terms, but what you said is absolutely correct. There are a ton of pitfalls that we face in this new age of AI. I think the other side, so that's what I'll say about that. But I think the other side of that is that we now have to level ourselves up. Everybody's got to level up. It's now time to, think about the skill set, but also think about the critical thinking. And I think the critical thinking as a skill set is becoming paramount. And that's something that we need to focus on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Alex, weigh in?
Absolutely. And thank you, Dia, for shifting us a little bit to see the full picture and understand some of those downside risks and what about when it doesn't go ideally. I think there's certainly a risk where if we overlook that, we could be overlooking a lot of harm that can be created. A term that comes to mind is one that was coined by Meredith Broussard, who's a woman of color and a data journalist and computer science professional at NYU. And she coined the term techno-chauvinism. This was in 2016, so before the boom of AI as we know it now. But she coined the term techno-chauvinism as a way to describe the feeling of when you think that technology is always the solution, right? Like, is it always the easiest way to get from point A to point B? Do you just jam in technology into any gap and think that that is the optimal solution? And yeah, we do face that challenge where certainly people in places where it should or could be handled in a human-to-human interaction, instead that it's handled in a human-to-chatbot interaction. And when we think about some of the effects that have come, especially in politics and the electoral space, about when information bubbles start to become a chamber of resonance where the only information that one interacts with is that which affirms their own beliefs, led to some of the radicalism, polarization that we've seen in recent years. So there's certainly downside risk there. But yeah, overall, it's the mindful use of it and finding the optimal use of it. I see a lot of comments in the chat about how to make AI education relevant, and I think that a lot of it is digital literacy. So when you're receiving messages that are often created by AI, how do you parse out the truth from that, right? And a human truth from that. Being able to tell real from fake in the media landscape is essential, especially not only in the political, but in all of interpersonal life. So yeah, digital literacy, when we're being inundated by content, and now more and more percentage of that is through AI-driven content. How do we parse out real from fake? So I think that's essential, and especially to mitigate downside risk, it's not only to have guardrails, and I'd be interested in your responsible AI perspective on this, but guardrails for what content is produced and then is fed in and multiplied by the usage of AI.
Yeah, I just want to sort of touch on something, and Gary, you mentioned this, right? And going back to remembering calculators, I can remember that too, right? And part of the conversation then was about how dumb we were going to be because, right, we weren't doing math anymore, but we were going to use the calculators. And so there's this little bit of like tension here, right? Because it's similar, but not the same. Right. The intelligence that we're gaining with AI is far beyond what we gained with the computer. And so at the very beginning, I was saying the same thing. I said, oh, people were having this discourse before. I remember when we went from calculators and we started using calculators in class and they said we wouldn't know how to do math. I tell you, I don't think my teenagers know how to do math, to be honest. That probably has less to do with a calculator and the way they're teaching math today. But we'll leave that alone for a moment. But you know, there was this school of thought that introducing the technology would then make us dumber, or that we weren't going to be able to have those skills. And I think there is a very real difference with people from, let's say, my generation who had to learn math and had to learn certain things. And now we're using technology as an assist, right? Like as a co-pilot, versus learning with technology as their only reference. And so some of what is possible for them to gain, right, is being missed. And there was a recent study done by, so those of you, I work for AWS, I'm very sorry, because I didn't talk about this. I've mentioned Microsoft, like I'm going to mention them again, but they did a study with Carnegie Mellon that actually said, this was in Forbes, that talked about AI making us dumber and that there are evidence of this. Now, I think in particularly at certain ages and spaces, because of the over-reliance on technology and not having the foundation in certain areas of education where I'm saying we, like of this generation, might have. So I think there are some intentional, you know, shifts and some things that we have to be aware of, right? But with and then to go back to what you were saying, Alex, about like education and how do we. Education is a critical piece of this, very much like computers in the shift. And I'm old enough to remember starting off with a typewriter and then going to the brother sort of word processor. And then we got to computer, and computer literacy became a standard, de facto standard. You don't get a job without computer literacy. We're going to be making that shift too and saying you don't get a job without AI literacy, right? In many cases, you have to be able to navigate these new systems, and that's going to be essential. And so this sort of ground level or foundational level of AI awareness and education is going to be critical, especially when we start thinking about the ways in which it's being exploited and the impact that has on communities as well. So I think all of that is there. Now, again, I said I'm going to offer this because you both, Alex and Carrie, you were speaking very, optimistically about the opportunity, and I do believe that opportunity exists, and we're seeing a lot of advancement and a lot of benefit from the technology. I think that will continue, but I talk about this in the context of the unintended, just like what we saw with social media. Right. Great in its advancement. Now we're looking back at all of the things we didn't pay attention to and the implications that is having. And I'm hoping to elevate people's awareness so that we can be smarter, because we have time, right, to make adjustments so that we can be smarter about some of this technology movement and what that means for us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I love this rich dialogue from different angles and perspectives. And I have two questions before we turn over to our Q&A. And one of the questions is relative to something that's already populated as a question, but it's directed specifically or initially with Gary and Dia, but Alex, please chime in. And this is in regards to government. Your thoughts about, what are their thoughts on the government's ease of regulations for AI from business and or personal perspective. And also part 2 to that, and it's also maybe a little bit more specific also for you, Dia, as well, regarding your role. What are your thoughts about government's ease and regulations of AI, and where are some of the implications as it relates to public interest, education, awareness, and safety? So the theme there is the government regulations. I see that that's in the chat as well, but I wanted to offer it up to Gary, Dia, from where you sit, and then Alex, please chime in.
Yeah, that's an interesting question for me. I haven't really dove into all of the considerations of it. I do know that as of January 2025, regulations around AI have been eased. I think just like many regulations, there's a positive and a negative to that.
Mm-hmm.
I do see further innovation possibly happening. I don't know if the delta is big enough between what is already happening with the regulations in place versus not. There are some real concerns on my side with the bias of the data and the bias of AI.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's as an innovator, I welcome it, right? Because it gives me the opportunity to just go at it.
Mm-hmm.
But from a human perspective or governance perspective, it's really scary to me. It's really scary.
Thank you.
So a couple of things. One is this current administration is much more focused on AI for innovation and making sure that we have less of regulatory burden around AI so that we can innovate and continue to be a leader in this space. And we, very much have been the large majority of AI investment in, from investors, into startups and into AI has largely been dominated by, companies and organizations in the U.S. So while we are seeing technology advance in other countries, certainly we are, currently leading in that space with some, regions certainly developing expertise and competing in terms of the models and its capability. AI safety is being downplayed in some instance from a sort of regulatory perspective at the federal level, with the exception of cases where it will have an impact on national security. At the state and local level, however, in the US in particular, the state and local level, there have been over 700 pieces of legislation till now, the month of May, that all have some element of, attempts to control or to put guardrails around some portions of AI. So at the state and local level, now many of those may not pass, but there are still folks that are thinking about ways in which they could introduce legislation and try to bring some degree of guardrail or control around the advancement of the technology. Outside of the US, there's still very much a move around AI safety. There is something called like the Hiroshima principles and things coming out of the OECD and other organizations, all with the intent of driving the safe and harmless sort of evolution of technology and AI in particular. So we're seeing mixed things. The other thing that I would say in that context is that businesses are paying attention to some elements of this, of responsible AI, because they have to. So there was a comment here about hallucinations. That's when the system will provide responses that are seemingly plausible, but aren't necessarily true or accurate.
Mhm.
And you can think as a business owner, if I'm producing something or I'm going to use it as a part of my, solution to customers, I want to make sure that it's telling the truth or that it's going to give good responses and not create conditions where I'm liable. Like when one of the chatbots, sold something or a car, for a ridiculous price that wasn't supposed to be, and then had to abide by that because that was what was presented, and the chatbot was operating and acting as the company, for instance, right? They don't want conditions like that, so they're doing work to make sure that we can ensure the systems are going to be as truthful as possible, right? That's an element of responsible AI. They're doing things to, make sure that the systems are safe, right? That's an element of responsible AI because that's important to them, or that there's security in play because that's important to them in maintaining their data, right? So I do think that in spite of or irrespective of the position of legislation, companies that are building are thinking about elements of responsible AI because they feel like it's important, for them to deliver a good product. And I'm hoping that more of them continue to keep that stance in areas like bias and inclusion, because it's important for them to be able to serve the multitude of customers in all sort of shapes and sizes, if you will, right, that will want to purchase their products. Like that's going to be an advantage for them.
Thank you, dear, for that. And Alex, did you want to chime in?
Absolutely, I would love to.
Okay, thank you.
We're getting to a really critical conversation when we talk about government regulation and the technology. Thinking first to the European Union and some of their general data protection regulations from times past. It was passed about a decade ago, and it has a significant impact in a user's experience. For example, like the cookies that are automatically applied when you're surfing the web, different when you're from an EU browser versus when you're in a US-based browser. The EU expanded upon that, the General Data Protection Regulation with the AI Act last year in 2024. Which categorize it along risk levels. So if this AI system is being deployed in these use cases, depending on what risk level that could have in terms of impact on society, then it requires various levels of rigor in terms of its testing for safety. One of the really troublesome applications, if you think about if AI is applied to situations like mortgage lending or criminal justice sentencing, then some of the algorithmic biases that are present could then have a lot of real world harm. And so I think that this interplay, like a government's role should be to protect its citizens, but also to balance the incentives and the desires of various different actors and find that consensus. So that harmony, if it's going to be embedded in our systems, then it needs to not be, in my opinion, a engineer or a team builds a technology, deploys it into our world, and then we kind of wait and see what happens, and we kind of like observe the behavior, and it can lead to some unintended harms if we think mindfully and carefully about it. Then we can start to head off some of those downside risks that we've been identifying throughout this conversation. Again, the example of social media comes to mind. So now that we've had social media in our lives for a decade or two and seeing what the impact has been, how can we head off some of those risks to society and the way that we interact with one another? And so, from the business side, of course, it's you mentioned like the competition among models, and it's been interesting, especially with the DeepSeek that came out. Excuse me, with DeepSeek coming out, many said like, "Oh, China's gonna one up the United States in terms of AI development," where a lot of the capital expenditure has been with U.S. technology firms continuing to push more and more money into AI development, but through that, there is the advantage of we move the curve along. So, of course, based on the gains made through a lot of investment, then coming behind that, it's a quicker rise to that level because the ground has been plowed, so to speak. So I see where that keeps us in the lead, and that's why the export controls over chips to be able to maintain our lead in AI is necessary. And I also can see where on the flip side of that if one could see applying more regulation as, are we slowing down? Are we giving up our lead? So definitely a push and pull there. But in the middle, it's like, who's going to mediate that? How is the government going to function and do that and to be able to play that role? Unfortunately, our government is posting AI generated images of the president as the Pope or as a Star Wars character. So I don't have quite a lot of faith in our current government to play that role.
So the one thing that I would challenge is that, at least from my perspective, ensuring safety is not a prohibitor to us advancing, in a place for innovation. And I tell businesses that all the time, right? This is not a either or, that if I have to innovate or if I want to innovate and drive my use of AI, then I can't focus on safety, right? Like responsible AI is an enabler for good practices, solid sort of, and that's an enabler for, increased adoption, because I promise you, as businesses fall on the wrong side of, that development and start to get the sort of public scrutiny and exposure because they've had an issue where their product or service was discriminatory in some fashion or did not, that actually has an impact. Now, for some of our tech companies in certain spaces, not enough of an impact, but for a lot of other organizations, it has had an effect on their business and their ability to service customers. And I'm hoping that more of us, customers listening as well, would say, if this technology or if this business doesn't align with my values, much like what people are doing in the way of DE&I and protesting, that we too would find ways in order to sort of protest with our dollars and with our data and with our access, so that businesses feel the weight of not paying attention to sort of critical areas where security, inclusion, safety matter.
Wonderful. Oh, this is great. So Gary, you were on mute if you were chiming in.
So I was. And so I was going to say, and to add to that, as a business and innovator, and entrepreneur, our job, especially in the tech space, is to push the envelope as far as we can, right? Without affecting our shareholders, without affecting our customers or our livelihood. We hire lawyers to handle many of the issues that may come up around regulations. I agree with both with what Alex and Dia is saying, but I think there's another side of it as well. And our job is to continue to push, continue to innovate, but within a responsible manner.
Great. Thank you. So we got some well-rounded perspectives there, giving us a fuller picture around what's actually happening and how deep we can go, and some of the things we need to be aware of, even with how we're making selections and making choices within our respective connections, especially for those who are inside of the room with us right now. So I would have one question for you, each of you, and then we're going to look at the chat and be able to respond to some of those questions. And then we will close out by asking you, what is the one thing or comment, takeaway, or give to for those who are in the room with us? So the question I have is, how do you incorporate AI into ways to promote your own well-being in your personal and or professional life? Any advice for others? How are you doing it? Any advice for others in terms of well-being? Maybe I'll start. I don't use it for my therapist, so that's something that you don't do. Okay, gotcha.
It's not my companion either.
Okay.
But certainly I think there are opportunities. So I'll give you like well-being, and this is a very real example. We had some weird smell coming from what I believe to be the air conditioning unit, and I couldn't understand why. And so, I go to AI to ask it a number of questions, give it conditions, and have it help sort of sort out for me, like, where are the potential areas where now I have to reach out to, a professional to help me in my home, and to translate and or suss out the right kind of questions I should be asking them to make sure that they're actually providing me the best recommendation in order to address the issue. Like that for me is mental well-being, when I know my home is taken care of and I'm not, going to get a contractor, which I've had bad contractors before, that's going to, waste my money and then cause me to have to get a lawyer, et cetera, right? Like that for me. So it has been, a companion or co-pilot, Alex, for me, and helping to sort out challenges sometimes that I will encounter within spaces where I don't have expertise. And I think that that's been, one way. And of course, I use it to translate. Like I took 48 girls on a college tour. I don't have girls. I have sons, teenagers. And so I used it to give me tips for, the girl talk conversation and all that kind of stuff, because, translating and talking to teenagers sometimes, so it's been a translator too, not in language. Well, maybe that is another language, but it's helped me in that capacity, and knowing that I could make connection with them, especially, for our college tour, was it, empowering and exposing them to HBCUs, but we wanted them to have an experience. And so I use that, to help me. And you all might say that's not mental well-being, but for me, making sure that I could get back in the way, make the connections that were important, all of that sort of eases some stress or burden, and that helps my well-being.
That's well-being directly. Yes, being very selective. Who's next, Alex or Gary? If you could briefly let us know what you do and or any advice.
Yeah, I could hop in there. And yeah, as you mentioned with using it as a therapist, definitely to be exercise caution if doing that. You gotta trust the professionals. Certainly maybe as with the idea of a 0 to 1. So for me, I found that I actually was able to realize that I needed to go get checked out for something by sending a picture to ChatGPT. Well, I wouldn't, it's the way that it was discovered, and I got on the front end of it and was able to take care of myself. If an unexpected thing happens and where's the quickest way to get advice, I have seen that AI can play that role, that 0 to 1. It's not going to get me all the way there, but it's okay, monitor, analyze, take action. It's played that role for me. I also say from the mental side, heavily in vision boarding. So for me, as I'm kind of entering new phases of life and starting to plot out the future and understanding how to navigate certain processes, or even to create a vision for myself, I recently did an exercise where I, used all of my inputs of what's the ideal day in my life look like, present and future. What are, input all the different elements of my personal vision, put that together, and then ask the AI to create either affirmations or create a vision statement, or even use the voice chat feature to then put a voice behind that so that I can listen to it and have not only the visual reading of it, but then also have the auditory affirmation of it as well. Then with ChatGPT now being able to put out images, okay, create this as a vision board, give me these, help me to produce a theme. So I've gone through that exercise, and I found that to be helpful for me. It's certainly not a fix all, but there's a role to play. And it's when you have, what tools do you have available, at least to get yourself started? It's been there to reach for. And, I also can reflect in the fact, as I mentioned at the beginning, AI, I use it more and more than I did even a year or a year before that. I definitely I'm a subscriber to the ChatGPT Plus, because I need all the, I kept hitting my word maximums. So I needed to be able to send as many photos. You say what?
So check out Claude.
Yeah, definitely Claude as well for the especially with the software development, seeing much better in that field. But yeah, so I use it deeply in my life, and I recognize where it's is there downside risk increasing from that? Absolutely. I would say that I still kind of cling to that value, but with a caveat there. So yeah, it does have a role to play in well-being, in the fact that it's a useful tool that we can make use of. It's helped me out in certain ways. It also is not fix everything, but it can be useful along the way.
Right. Thank you for that, Alex. Hey, Gary, let's round out with you giving us yours.
Yeah, so for me, from a personal side, I do use it from a physical perspective. That is, if I'm having physical ailments or something of that nature, then yeah, I'll jump onto Claude or Chat to see what's being said about that, and then immediately go to my doctor, right? On the mental side, for me, I turn it off, put it down, and talk to my family.
Okay.
That's probably the best thing that I do from the mental side as far as AI is concerned, for all the reasons that Dia and Alex have mentioned thus far. From a professional side, is situational gamification. It is finding and creating AI agents that can improve critical thinking.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been such a rich conversation. I can imagine that people are writing down some notes, some points. I know I've been writing down some things myself. Thank you so much. We will be remiss not to see this chat because they're in action and they want to hear from you specifically regarding their questions. So if I can ask if we can take a look at the questions that we have posted in the chat, take a look and let's respond to a few. We have a few minutes left, and we will ask each panelist to round us out with a 60-second leave behind word for the audience. So let's take a look at the chat. And if there's something that stands out specifically that you want to answer, any of the we have here, how has AI affected the workplace at your companies? Have you seen layoffs because of the development of technology? And I would assume that's for anyone who have a urgent to respond to that.
I would say no. I know there's been a lot of talk about what is expected in terms of impact to jobs. I think that it's been overestimated in the short term, in terms of like the number of jobs that we would see replaced and shifted. That's still not fully realized. But I haven't seen it specifically at my company. I'm sure that there are some that have been, seeking optimizations in some way and have left and have, reduced headcount as a result of that. I mean, Gary said that he had 4 people he gained, right? And so some company is like, if I can gain 4 in one, then maybe I hire less and or let go of some, but I haven't seen it specifically at AWS.
No layoffs. Okay, specifically. And the next question we have would be, we have several. Where can people find resources to learn how to be prompt engineers and how to build AI agents?
There's a lot of different methodologies, but keeping it real, I'd say your first bet is probably to jump on YouTube and actually search YouTube for prompt engineering courses or tidbits. I know I work with a lot of college students, hire a lot of college students, CompSci hire college students as well as others, and that is their primary learning vessel, is YouTube. So I would put that out there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question. We have maybe 2 more. There was one question I saw in the chat that may relate a little bit. So for young Black professionals trying to enter tech, what are the keys to getting into AI related careers without a traditional computer science degree?
I can take that as well if you like. I work with a lot of students, and I work with a lot of young professionals in the AI business. And the first thing that I would say to you is that whatever it is that own it. Whatever that profession is, whatever that subject matter is, own it, be proficient in it, and be able to talk about it like you're talking to a 2-year-old. Even from a technology company perspective, or at least I'll talk about mine and some others that I work with, CoreWeave and a couple of others, we're more concerned in your critical thinking. We can teach you how to build an AI agent or how to do prompt engineering, What we can teach is the critical thinking.
Mm-hmm. That's right. The critical thinking is a very important piece there. Do we have one more question? We have time for one more. How do we make AI education relevant for elders in our communities who feel left behind by tech?
Yeah, so there are a couple of. I live in Maryland, and so I don't know about what they're doing in New Jersey, but we have in our Department of Aging a group that actually is doing like computer courses. Oh, you know what? Even better.
Okay.
My mom, every time I talk about something AI, my mom tells me that AARP has a course or a class. So I would suggest they need to get plugged into AARP because she's always like, oh, I found a class. Or I just learned something that you told me and they did something with AARP. So I would say that is a really great resource. There are a number of other community organizations or Black organizations that have been trying to focus on AI education broadly, but I think AARP probably like hits the mark really well for that demographic.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. That has been one of those popular concerns that people have had. See, one more, last one. I'm also concerned AI will take away knowledge-based jobs. I'm seeing people's roles be eliminated, and while AI will create new jobs, they don't have those skills.
Let me just say something here, and I want to offer a perspective, right?
Okay.
With every technology advancement, there is going to be a displacement and a shift of jobs and roles. The thing that we need to be prepared for is how do we shift or how do we move and adapt with the change? So when we went from horse and buggy to automobile, yeah, we didn't keep the people that were responsible for the carriages. They're not the ones that are responsible for, maintaining and servicing automobiles. And even if we go from when the automobiles were the automobiles of the past to now the computerized one, my uncle tells me all the time, he can't work on these computerized cars anymore, right? Because they've changed the technology some enough that even though he was a great auto mechanic, without the computer skills, he can't, actually fix the Mercedes today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm saying that to say that there is a very real, there is a reality that roles are going to shift, skills are going to change. You're going to need, and we need to adapt and be ready for that. Because it's going to happen. It just is. And so we could stay in the space of fear and concern. And it's like, no, we've got to move because it happens all the time. When we went from the agricultural to industrial, that was changed. This is happening. And this is a trend or a movement that is just going to go either with us or without us. So it's how do we now adapt to the change that's happening? Because it's very real.
Yes. And I always would add to people just always say it's the mindset shift, and don't get small and discouraged, especially those like an example you just gave. They feel like they've lost or they don't have because they spent so many years being successful at that skill. So then it becomes them understanding the technology and that it's not pushing them away, but it's just another way of doing something. And then them possibly revisiting and or maybe supporting them with the conversation around how to leverage what they can do, maybe somewhere else. And it may not be in that.
Yeah. And that skill and that expertise, I mean, in many cases, right? So we were talking about prompting, right? You can't tell the machine to do something in medicine or certain areas of medicine unless you really have a good understanding. So with the drug discovery, they still have a great understanding with how, the chemicals and et cetera, and proteins react and what that means in order to be able to instruct the system to build what they then now, materialize. A necessity for our skills across a number of different industries and specializations that are still required. I think that's a higher level sort of area of skill versus sort of something that might be introductory. That's still necessary. And then we have transferable skills, right? That are still going to be extremely applicable, in any role. And so we definitely have to tap into that.
Thank you so much. Wow. Time has moved on. We are now at the closing of the panel, but we cannot leave without a couple of things happening. One can be happening in the background, and that is we will populate some resources in the chat, which will be some links for our audience to have, resources that will move forward to us from the panelists to you. And also, we will populate a little bit in a few minutes, a survey for our audience to complete. But before we give 100% attention to that, I want to turn it over to the panelists. If you can give a quick 1 minute comment, leave behind, encouragement to the audience, what will that 1 minute be for you? Alex.
Thanks. And for the audience, I would say that there's many things that one can't control, right? Like AI is a defining factor in the world and quite a lot is shifting. All of these forces are happening at the same time. Where does that leave the individual? Somewhere in the mix. Whether it's with AI or with any of these many changing things, one must always control what they can control in whatever spaces that they occupy. And as it relates to AI, we can choose to be mindful, be practical, and be responsible in the way that we apply it and that we interact with it. So that's my primary word, is to be mindful with it, right? Control what you can control in the space that you occupy and continue to sharpen the saw, especially in this conversation about job skills. The technological innovation continues to churn forward in whichever format, and will continue on. So control what you can control, sharpen the saw, and continue to be the best that you can be in this AI world.
Thank you for that, Alex. Thank you so much. Gary.
First of all, I want to thank you, Claudia, for doing a phenomenal job of moderating this.
Thank you.
Dia and Alex, thank you for the rich conversation. I'm walking away with a lot of good things just from listening to the two of you. What I would want to leave you with is, or leave the audience with, is be insatiable learners. Be insatiable learners. Don't shy away from this technology. As Dia said, it's here. It's not going anywhere. It's only going to move forward. And you've got to make a decision of whether you want it to move forward with you or without you. I would bet that you would want to have it move forward with you. So I would encourage you to do that. I would also encourage you to reach back into our communities and support any effort that you see that centers on educating our kids in this technology. We have, as we always have had, extremely bright young individuals in our urban communities that don't have the resources to actually show who they are. You become their resource. Whether you know them or you don't, contribute to it, because that's how we move ourselves forward. That's how we move the technology forward with us in it, right? Because we talked about those implicit biases that exist within the technologies, because there's not enough people that look like us that are in there. And I would submit to you that we have them locked and loaded and ready to go. We just need to give them the tools to soar.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have another minute left, of course. Badia, please. Thank you so much.
So I would say that responsible AI is everybody's responsibility. And what I mean by that is we are responsible, whether we are building systems, designing systems, or just users of the systems and being impacted by them. We too have a responsibility. So my encouragement would be, part of your responsibility is to become educated. We talked about AI literacy being a necessity. And so you need to be educated about AI. And there are tons of opportunities to do that, conversations like this. YouTube and so many other sources that can help you in doing so. The second is you have a responsibility to be mindful about how you share your data and where you share your data. And I think we've been talking a little bit about data and the impact of that. And so you need to be thoughtful about how and be responsible about how you share your data. And I think the third thing would then be being responsible about how you maintain oversight, human oversight over important decisions. Don't resign or decide that AI knows best or is right and sort of give over your autonomy to AI wherever possible. And then the last part is you are responsible to check your sources, right? And to have and have multiple sources, because AI is driving content to us in a lot of ways, or we might be relying on AI. But if you verify and check sources and use a multiplicity of sources, you won't be in echo chambers. You will potentially not share information that is untruthful or unreliable, and then have a much more sort of secure and safe way of leveraging the technology. So that's my call to you: be responsible in your use of AI.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, panelists. And I can imagine that our audience is enjoying this as well. I would like to say again, thank you, thank you, thank you. If they're putting some notes in the chat, I would like to say thank you for saying yes to us here at our chapter, North Jersey Alumni Chapter. Thank you for being with us for the second year. Thank you for taking the time out and being very intentional in being in spaces that we're not in, where you can make the difference. And we'll take heed to what you just gave us today in today's conversation to do our part. And we ask that you continue to do your part in saying yes in spaces like this, where we get to be up close and personal and hearing what's happening for people like yourselves in the spaces that you are in, who's making an impactful difference, very intentional. And we appreciate you. So much continued success. With that being said, again, thank you, panelists. Much continued success to each of you. And I'll turn it over to co-chair Faith Edgar and to Madam President Renee Belton. Oh, you're on mute.
At this time, I would like to introduce the president of the North Jersey Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Renee Belton, for closing remarks.
Good evening. I would love to. This was fabulous. It was so much information. I couldn't take notes fast enough. I want to first thank our moderator, Claudia. Thank you so very much. And Faith and Avonia for just giving us such a wonderful program this year. And our repeated guests, Alex, Dia, and Gary, you are phenomenal. Thank you so much for delivering such a powerful presentation. Your insights just sparked meaningful dialogue and left a lasting impression on everyone in attendance, I am sure. We really, truly appreciate your time and your super energy that you brought to the discussion, all of your expertise, and your voice helped make this event successful and left some jewels for all of our guests to move forward with AI. The one thing that I know definitely stuck out to me was checking those sources. So I will take that advice and check my sources every time I use my chat GPT. But thank you once again for coming and giving us seeds of knowledge. And we so do appreciate you with great gratitude. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Please don't forget to complete the survey. We need your feedback. We really appreciate you. Please complete the survey that we'll be forwarding on to you. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Yes.
Are we backstage again?
The stream has.
Yes, when I see Ashley.
Wait. We're ending the stream right now.